Sam.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very good, thank
It's
you.
good to have a chance to catch up with you this morning, and kind of cool that there's a few other people who get to listen to us catch up. I thought maybe to start off, I'd ask you, it's a good opportunity for everybody to hear from you today, but what would you be doing otherwise if you weren't sitting here chatting with us? What does a Friday morning, slightly overcast in Auckland mean for Sam at the moment?
Right. This is probably not a normal Friday morning for me. Would be. We've had a kind of a tough year. It's been a few ups and downs, but we are heading into a good kind of final quarter. It's always really big for us, the holiday season, and it's a little bit of a time to pause and actually, I mean, it kind of sounds a bit corny, but think about what's really important to us. I mean, I say corny because this is what, startup founders are supposed to be doing, right? Yeah. But I'm actually...
Sounds like you're thinking about your values.
Writing out our value statement. We did some work on it a little while ago and just kind of coming back to it being like, all right, what are the things that are really important to us, and it's time now to get those written down.
Hey, that's kind of interesting. I mean, Sam presented the Blackbird values this morning when kicking off, and it's kind of always interesting when you see people present those. They kind of always feel quite concrete, but they're obviously a work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've learnt from going through this a second time is at the beginning you really don't need to write it down, or I felt like you didn't. You're all in the room together, there's 5 of you, you can all sit around and talk about everything. Those things are kind of demonstrated by how you act, and sometimes you don't act the way that you want to, but you can talk about why you did that or how you'd like to do it better, and it's kind of natural and it's evolving, and people just get it. And then you start hiring people, and new people come in and they weren't in those initial conversations, or you are in a situation where it's challenged and something happens where you're like, hey, hold on, that's not how we do things. And so there does come a point, I think, where it's like, okay, it is time to get that written down.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask you today. We're also, if you have questions out there, feel free to use the app, and they'll pop up on the screen here. So if anybody comes up with better questions than what I've got, then we'll shuffle things around. But,
yeah.
I mean, let's maybe start at where we met. So it goes back a few years now, and you were part of a small group of founders called the Flounders Club.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can explain what that group was and how it got started and how you got into it, and a little bit of background there.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I met Vaughan from Vend, and he was talking about how there was this group of founders who were often floundering, hence the pun on the name.
I always just thought there was a misspelling. But
No, I like it, it's good. And getting together once a month and having dinner and just talking about what's working for them, what's not working for them, and it really was founders support group. And I was like, oh, I'd like to join that.
Even though you weren't a founder?
Yeah, so at the time I was the CEO of a company called Serato. I wasn't one of the founders, I was actually employed by the founders, but I ran the company. And so I wasn't really a founder, I was a bit of an imposter. And at that stage, Serato was actually quite mature. I almost argue we weren't a startup either. But I had been thinking about what I might do in the future, and starting something, and I wanted to get in on that. And so I came in with, I guess, a lot of experience in running a bigger company, but also a lot of questions about how to start a company.
And so when you say support group for founders, give some concrete kind of examples, the sort of stuff you would talk about were the things that were causing you pain.
Yeah. I mean, there was half a dozen or 8 maybe people there at really, really different stages, pre-market, already in market, already quite big, different things. Companies that were services companies that were trying to kind of get into product, companies that were just kind of pure startups, SaaS startups. And it would be, this time the thing I'm working on is trying to put together an ESOP program, and everyone's like, oh. And it's like, what? And it's like, yeah, it's hard. And I thought it was just me that was finding that really hard.
So shared problems.
Yeah, a lot of it was, this is something I'm finding really hard. And sometimes people would say, hey, you're kind of overthinking it. It doesn't need to be that hard to think about it like this. So that's really helpful. Or just, that stuff is just really hard.
Yeah, and there was, I mean, from what I understand, but there was an element of holding to account as well, like.
Yeah. One thing that I think, especially for me as a solo founder, it was really useful to have this external entity, even if it was just a group of basically friends, and you could say whatever you wanted, and no one's going to give you a hard time if you don't do it. But at the end, we'd go around and say, by next time, I will have done this.
Right, I like it.
And then someone would say, last time you said you were going to do this, and be like, really, bringing that up? I haven't done it at all. Right. But just that act, and for me, again, as a solo founder, that's been a big part of what I look for in a board, and why I really wanted to have a board was that same sort of kind of external accountability, and also someone to just be like, I want to do that. Is that realistic? Is it ambitious enough? Is it unrealistic?
Sweet, I like it. So you mentioned Serato, which was the company you previously were at before Melodics.
Yeah.
And maybe you can just explain a little bit about what Serato was and how that led to Melodics, maybe, like what, because they were in related industries, obviously, and how the things that you learnt in Serato sort of led to where you are now.
So Serato is just celebrating their 20-year anniversary.
Wow. That's older than I realised.
Yeah. And they there's an article in the Herald that came out this week, and I don't know how they pulled it off, but they got to put their 20-minute 20-year anniversary video at the top of the article. And it's really quite interesting. I was a university student studying engineering and learning how to DJ, and getting really into DJing. It was fun, and kind of realised that there was this really cool thing happening with MP3s, which were kind of new at the time, showing my age, and that you could. The cool thing about DJing with records was that you can put your hands on them and you can move them and manipulate them. The fact that the music is on the record is kind of almost secondary, and that I was learning about radial encoders and technology and things. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could control the music that I've ripped off my CD with my CD ripper desktop computer, and control the music with that.
CD?
And I became really, really obsessed by this idea. And there's this funny thing I don't think anyone who was cutting together the video for the 20-year anniversary actually realised is I was obsessed by this idea. I was studying electrical engineering. I had the kind of know-how to know that it was feasible, but definitely not the skill to actually do it. I tried to convince my friend, who was a much better engineer, that he should help me with it. And basically, I tried to convince all my friends that they should help me with it. Long story short, it took me to Amsterdam because I saw that there was this company that was doing it, and they were based in the Netherlands. And so I tried to meet them. I actually did meet them at 4 o'clock in the morning at a raucous party. And I was standing next to this guy, and he was swaying, and I was swaying, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I make the thing that I've been thinking about for the last 7-8 years. And I was like, oh my God. And drunkenly, completely destroyed any chance of ever working with them.
That's a good, useful takeaway for most of the people here.
I was just way too keen. It was random dude at a party. He's like, I've come from New Zealand to find you. And it didn't really work out.
But I mean, you obviously have a passion for the industry and the product that you've built within that industry. Did you build Melodics for yourself? Did you want to learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been a real amateur musician for a long time, and when I got Guitar Hero and played with that, I was like, I really want this to actually help me learn rather than learn to play a plastic controller.
Just to be entertaining.
But I'm just going to wrap up that long-winded story because I was in Amsterdam and I really wanted to make this thing work. I had a lot of friends. I've always had a lot of friends that worked in television, and film and TV. So I convinced my flatmate. Through the magic of television, we did a video of the system working, which of course it wasn't working at all. We just cut it together as if it was. And in the 20-year video, they've used that as the explainer. I don't think anyone realised that was me talking about something that completely didn't exist.
There you go.
But then I I got an email from my friend who was like, oh, this weirdest thing just happened. I was at a barbecue in Auckland, and I met this guy that's working for this company that's doing that thing you've been talking about for the last 10 years. And I was like, what? How is that possible? It's like, yeah, they're in Birkenhead. I'm like, what? So I came back and like basically muscled my way in. I was like, you've got to hire me. I've been thinking about this for forever.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, maybe now compare that to the first product or customer or whatever you built for Melodics. Like, what's the origin story for Melodics? Do you have another drunken episode? Or?
No, not quite so drunken. So was at Startup for 10 years and was thinking about what to do next. And I had the luxury, I had a young family, young kids, and took some time out, and the luxury of kind of taking some time and thinking about it, and started, kind of had 6 projects that I worked in parallel, and kind of gradually was like, no, that one's no good, cut it off until I had 2 left. I actually started 2 companies, one didn't go anywhere, and Melodics was the one that took off. Mm-hmm. But it was really thinking about not just what product I could make, but what network I had built over that time and who I knew. And a lot of that was the companies making musical instruments.
Mm-hmm. Your industry connection sort of
gave a few of the other ideas were nothing to do with music tech, but it kind of felt stupid to do that.
Yeah, right.
And I think I knew from the previous experience that having a great product is a tiny fraction of what it takes. And the biggest challenge that you have is that no one knows who you are. So overcoming that obscurity is the biggest thing.
Right. I feel like you had some advantages. I remember shortly after I invested in Melodics, I was in Auckland one night, and you sent me a note quite late saying, how I'm going out with my friend Jeff. My friend Jeff. You have to be careful with your friends. And I was like, it's late. I've got a busy day tomorrow, so nah. And it was only later talking to you that I discovered you were talking about DJ Jazzy Jeff, your friend from...
Yeah.
I mean, those industry connections must have kind of informed how you thought about the product and helped you kind of narrow in on what it could and would be.
Yeah. I had made great contacts with particularly a lot of companies that made instruments and a lot of artists. And so kind of when putting together the model for Melodics, it was like, if we can get the instrument companies to spread the word about us,
right.
We can work with artists to make lessons, then that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, right. I mean, you often hear founders talk about channels, but that's an interesting kind of lens on that view.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward a few years. Well, not even years, but one of the first kind of chewy decisions that you and I kind of threw around was around 500 startups. So you had the opportunity to go to the 500 Startup Accelerator.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain quickly what that is and how that came about and sort of the thinking process behind that.
So they are an investor, and they run an accelerator program. So 500 startups will invest in like 40 companies at a time, 3-4 times a year, and you go into this program.
Mostly based in San Francisco, or?
Yeah, the one I went to was based in San Francisco. Quite international. They bring companies from all around the world, and they make a smallish investment. It's not, you don't really go for the money. In fact, I think one of the points you made is you spend all that money doing it. So just don't think about it. Don't think about it in terms of the money. And they put you in this hardcore program, and with like amazing access to we had talks from like the head of marketing for Facebook, or not quite that, but like really, really, really senior people and really amazing people.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure that we needed that it was a good thing to do. Like I was quite naive looking back once I realised how prestigious they were at that time. It seemed like a no-brainer to do it, and in fact we'd been kind of shoulder tapped. So one of them came down to New Zealand. One of the entrepreneurs in residence came down to New Zealand and met with him, and he liked what we were doing, so he opened the doors for us.
And what was your reluctance like?
Was like, is this for founders that haven't done it before, and I've done not all of it, but a lot of it before, and is that going to be a waste of time?
Yeah.
yeah, more those sorts of things.
And so, like, with the benefit of hindsight, did you really need it? Like, what did you change your mind about? I guess is a good question.
Yeah, there were lots of things, and some of them weren't so relevant to me. Lots of things about company culture and the challenges of scaling up a company, and lots of the kind of always the harder stuff of how people interact and teams and things like that. And I'd made a plethora of mistakes over the last 10 years and learned a lot about that. So I knew more about that. And in fact, kind of ended up talking to lots of the other founders about that. A couple of things that we hadn't done, we'd never raised money because Serato was, I knew at the time it was unusual, but now I know that it was insanely unusual, that it was not only bootstrapped, but it was like very, very profitable from the very, very beginning. I had, late in the time at Serato, really wanted to get into this kind of more data-driven approach and being experimental.
Yeah.
So I was convinced that that was a good thing to do in a way forward, and we tried it. We'd actually tried it not long before we went up there, but we tried it, and it was, looking back, we did it really, really badly. And so the biggest thing I got was they're kind of like, you should be experimental, you should be metrics driven, you should do all of this stuff. It's like, yep, I know that already. And then they were like, here is a way of doing it on a plate, ready to go. It was like a way to operate, a way to operate your company in this way. On Mondays do this, on Wednesdays do this, here's a spreadsheet, here you go.
I feel like one of the other things that I observed is, I mean, you talked before when we were talking about Founders Club about the sort of aspect of being held to account. I feel like they kind of took that to a militant level.
Oh yeah, hardcore.
Right. So like what did that actually mean? Like you were weekly check-ins kind of thing?
Yeah. Where's your 20% month-on-month growth?
Yeah.
Like, we did 11.
Uncomfortable conversations.
It's like, wow, really? Yeah, really, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And as a Kiwi who had operated a business in America, where America was our biggest market, spent a lot of time there and worked with a lot of Americans and was really kind of comfortable and familiar with the American style of doing business, but still Kiwi, and going up there and just having this like, you know, this is the Navy SEALs and you're going to be the best of the best. And I'm like, oh, chill out, man. So, doing all right. But that push was really, really good.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so let's fast forward again to, you sort of referenced capital raising.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be unfair to say that capital raising hasn't been something that you've smashed so far.
Yeah.
Like it's something you've struggled with.
Yeah, it's super hard. I mean, I said just before, the hardest stuff is the people and the interactions, and really getting that right, and getting a really good culture, and I feel that's super important. But I think maybe capital raising is harder.
Yeah.
I think the only times I've ever felt like, you know what, I'm not really sure I want to do this anymore, have been around cap raising.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's really brutal.
Yeah, and so I mean, how do you overcome that? Like, what's the response to just that kind of brutality?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first things first, you've got to take quite good care of yourself, because part of what is brutal, I think, is this expectation that you will do it full time and run your company full time, and that if growth slows down during a cap raise, which, talking to other founders, it's normally does, right? This is the catch-22, is like you want to be hitting it, growing really fast, so it's just be like, you're going to miss out because we're on this rocket ship. But then you, and quite a bit of the team as well, is put onto this cap raise and things slow down. And the investors are like, well, you should be doing both. You should be able to do both. And it's hard to do both. But then there's this other thing where it's like, by the time, in our case it was Series A, by the time you reach Series A, the founder stepping back from running the business shouldn't slow down growth. You should have the team around you to do that. So, yep, okay. And conversely, it's also like, if you as the founder are doing this other thing, and growth is still going, then what are you doing?
Right. Which is, I mean, back to the very first question I asked you, what does an overcast Friday morning mean for you? Like, how are you contributing to growth?
Yeah.
And clearly by sitting here, you're not.
No.
So that was fun, thanks, yeah. I mean, a number of the questions that are coming through from the crowd are sort of referring to the challenges that you alluded to. And I mean, there's consequences of being focused on cap raising and focused on growth either way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where are you landing on that? How are you kind of resolving that impossible trade-off?
I think there is this ideal that does a lot of times feel like an ideal, but it's one to really work towards, where, and this is the kind of, like you talked about, that the expectations of 500, they'll be like, yeah, okay, Series A, give it 2 months. You got 2 months to do it. So you can't do a Series A in 2 months.
Yeah.
But they're actually like, no, you can and you should. And I think one of the good ways to manage it is to set a really aggressive timeline and time box it and have a plan B if it doesn't, because it can just, it's this thing where you've got to have a really strong impotence. You've got to have, there's got to be FOMO, basically. You've got to have leverage, and one of the best things is, like, you're going to miss out. There has to be a sense of you're going to miss out. Otherwise, I mean, this morning, Melanie's presentation with all of those, we're just going to wait, we're not quite ready yet. That you hear that a lot, and rejection, perseverance, probably themes you're going to hear a lot about today. I was measuring our progress in the number of no's that we got. It's like, how's the round going? It's like, well, I'm up to 25 no's, so I've still probably got a lot of work to do.
Right.
But sorry, to answer your question, is I think to have a deadline for yourself and say, okay, we're going to do it for this long. If it doesn't come in, then we're going to stop and we're going to go and do something else. And we're going to come back, and when we come back, we're going to figure out all of the things that were holding us back from doing it.
Yeah, right. I think that's an interesting point, Like what you're talking about is your plan B, really. And I think many of the founders that I've worked with have kind of struggled with that idea of having a plan B. Like, it feels like a failure.
Yeah.
To many, I think. But actually, I think you're a great example of the plan B, which is what you're currently executing. It's actually pretty bloody good.
Yeah. And it's a weird feeling because of the time you have to invest in the cap raise. You do this thing intensely for months and months and months, and then to pull out of it and go, actually, we're going to do something else, feels a lot like failure. And then you step back and you look at the company, and it's like, we're still growing really well. We've still got an amazing team. We're still doing all of these things. We haven't failed. We just failed to do that particular thing.
Yeah, right. Which is, I mean, I guess the overlying point there is there's not one path either.
No, it is definitely a wiggly, squiggly.
So let's talk about how you've pitched the company, because one of the things it really sticks in my brain from the initial pitch deck that you sent me was how you presented the company, and I think you've always kind of had this style of leading with what you've learned. And I actually pulled it up this morning. Like, the very first slide on the pitch deck you sent me said, we realised education has been reinvented everywhere except for music.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realised it, but that's an unusual way to lead your pitch deck.
Yeah, right. So I think there are definite standards with pitch decks, and the norm is like this problem solution one. And we got steered to, again, it was at 500, we did a workshop on pitch decks. We got steered to this other approach, which was past, present, future. And it's structured in 3 parts. There's like why we saw something that other people didn't see, or why we are better positioned to execute on an opportunity than anyone else. So looking back, that was the past part. And that's why it's like, we realized was like the really, in the workshop, it's like, if you can open your first slide with "we realized," that's good. And I was like, okay.
I love it, and I mean, I've shamelessly stolen that and recommend it to everybody
structure.
now. I think
it's a little bit it's a little bit unusual. It leads to quite a long pitch deck, and everyone's like, no, maximum this many slides. We go over that limit, and you got to tell the full story. And I use a tool called DocSend for sending out the pitch deck, which I highly recommend, because you can update your pitch deck and the links are all still work. should use that. But also you can see how much time people are spending on it, and you labour over this thing, and it's beautiful, and it's a work of art, and someone looked at it for 32 seconds on their phone, and you're like... because to get the whole story is like, we were here and we saw this thing, and now we're here, and that's the point to put all your achievements we're doing, and we're going over there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing it does, it forces you into put yourself in the shoes of the person who's reading the deck, right? The investor sort of mindset is like often much more interested in your scrappy execution than the genius of your idea.
Yeah.
Right, and so understanding, even how you've shifted in the relatively near term on your thinking about it and your execution of it.
Yeah. It does.
Valuable.
If you can get them to actually read it, it does give a good insight into the thinking of the company. Because you're right, it's not about like we've got this brilliant product and we have these metrics. It's like, who are these people and why are they going to do it? Like if I look forward 10 years. I'm convinced that a product like ours will exist, and so then the mission is like, why should it be us?
Right, and I don't want to make it sort of seem like you've completely fallen on your face too. You have successfully raised capital from myself and others.
Yeah.
In the process as well. So let's talk about how you've deployed that, because at some point Melodics went from being you and your crazy idea to being others. So like, talk about that very early expansion and maybe some of the more recent kind of team members you've added.
I think that you start off and it has to be all about the product, because you've got to build something. And so in the early days, it was the product development team and engineering and me and a junior person who was doing customer support and marketing and artist relations and social media and everything.
Yeah.
So we were quite product centric, and then as we got a little bit bigger, started to think more about the user acquisition and marketing and customer success and all of those other things. I think that one thing that startups don't do well, and we've been victim of this ourselves a few times as well, is switch early enough from thinking about what the product needs to be to and you get caught in this trap of like, if we add this feature, we'll grow, and this, we just add this one more thing, everything will be great. To thinking about like, okay, we've got something that people want, how do we now concentrate on finding more people like the people who like what we have, So really starting to think about marketing and the proposition and user acquisition early enough.
There are a lot of likes in that sentence, but yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. There's this concept of a company having three engines, right? So there's the product engine, the customer engine, and the company engine. Yeah. And I feel like one of your more recent sort of impactful hires is your CFO.
Right.
So maybe talk about the thinking process you went behind that role, because I think a lot of companies kind of never get to that role, or they get to it way too late.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get people who are much better than you at their specialty.
Which is a cliche, but also true.
Yeah. And I'm definitely, that's super easy with finance, because I'm not really good at it. And what I had learned from my previous company, we had an awesome person who was like going through university and studying accounting, and was more of a kind of a bookkeeper than a CFO for about 7 of the 10 years I was there. And near the end, we got an amazing CFO, and I was just like, oh, this changes everything. And so I just realized how
I feel like that story's not told enough. Every founder that I've worked with who's eventually and often reluctantly hired a CFO.
I wanted it. I was like hanging in there for the day that we could actually, we were big enough to be able to
justify it. Yeah.
Because I knew what a difference it would make.
Yeah. Someone just asked if we were hired as a comedy duo. I think people maybe think we're like standard. I sort of have this mental image of the two old dudes from the Muppets,
My wife's parting words for me as I left this morning were, just don't be boring. So it's like,
all right, I've got one more question. Then maybe if we still have any time, we can pick some off the screen. But we started off talking about how you weren't a founder.
Yeah.
You were at Flounders Club.
Yeah.
But you felt like an imposter. You're very clearly a founder now, right? Hopefully you've owned that.
Yeah. Definitely.
So that's a shift. Like, how's that changed you? What has being a founder mean, and how's that different?
This morning during Melanie's presentation, I was thinking about resilience, which is super important, as I said before. And I think I was thinking about that, has it made me more resilient, or have I survived as a founder because I am resilient? It's kind of hard to know. I think, though, it's just really important. Yeah, I mean, just not only the rejection from cap raising, but the whole thing is like, you got to be able to roll with the punches. I think the big difference between being a kind of a pseudo, not quite founder and an actual one is being able to do what I'm doing now, step back and be like, we've got a chance to decide what kind of company we want to be, and it's really up to me as a founder, but us as a team. And that's amazing, you know, when you stop and think about it. It's
amazing, like, and terrifying, right? There's also
no one
else who's going to do that.
You know, it's like, do we want to, you know, what change are we going to have in this world? And, you know, like, the thing I like about Melodics is we're not saving the world, we're not curing cancer, but we're not also making missile guidance systems, like two ends of the extreme.
Right.
But we're helping people learn to play instruments, musical instruments, and I feel good about like that. That's a good impact to have on the world. If more people play instruments, the world will be a better place. I think that I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
Sweet. Well, that's actually probably quite a nice place to finish. Thanks so much for taking some time out on an Overcast Friday. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Hopefully some people listening to us have enjoyed what we've had to say as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
All right. Cheers.